Greetings and good health. I am Dr. Jarek Asarko, a pediatric and family wellness chiropractor. This is your lifeline to vitality, where we discuss ways to cultivate family wellness. Good day and great health. Welcome back to another edition of your Lifeline to Vitality. Today on the podcast, how torticollis affects brain development. Life is expressed throughout the whole body, but is localized in the brain. It is the seat of intelligence. The brain is shaped by the perceptions it receives from the environment. The brain can better acclimate the body to the environment through this function. This is an essential quality that all life shares. The brain couldn't express the 5 main signs of life: assimilation, excretion, adaptability, growth, and reproduction without knowing its environment. The brain develops environmental patterns through sensory input. The brain puts out what is put into it. The brain receives input from 7 major senses: touch, taste, smell, sight, sound, vestibular, and proprioceptor. This sensory input is fundamental for brain development. Body sensory input influences what the brain expresses back out into the body. Sensory input starts in utero, or in the womb, for the baby even before all 7 senses are fully developed. The baby's brain receives its first input from the vestibular sense. The vestibular sense analyzes overall balance, specifically how the brain and eyes are positioned to the environment. It is headquartered in the inner ear. Establishing the vestibular sense is critical at this point since eyesight is not fully developed at this moment. Proprioception also develops in utero. The proprioception sense focuses on how the rest of the body, the extremities and torso, are positioned to the environment. The main housing centers for proprioception are found in the muscles and joints of the body. The greatest concentration of proprioceptors is found in the upper cervical spine. The suboccipital muscles of the upper cervical spine are the first muscles to develop in the womb. They directly attach the skull to the spine. When the infant's vision starts to develop, it makes a special connection between the vestibular and proprioceptor senses. This link is through an area of the brainstem called the vestibular nucleus. This 3-way conversation between the inner ears, eyes, and upper cervical spine send specific information to the cerebellum portion of the brain. The cerebellum makes up about 79% of the neural connections found in the brain and is involved primarily in motor learning, balance, posture, and fine motor movement coordination. The cerebellum is also connected with higher brain areas involved in language, attention, and mental imagery. The cerebellum is often called the seat of the subconscious and must develop first before higher cognition can mature. Proprioceptor, vestibular, and visual input assists the cerebellum in developing motor patterns for learning, balance, posture, and fine movement coordination. Any disruption in the functional input from the upper cervical spine, eyes, and/or inner ear can negatively affect the output of how the brain develops and adapts. Torticollis is one type of condition that negatively affects sensory input into the brain. Torticollis is a condition that involves incoordination of the neck muscles. Torticollis, sometimes referred to as wry neck, is very common in newborns. Torticollis presents with a persistently tilted head and rotated neck. Less severe torticollis presents with an infant favoring one side to look at or preferring to nurse on one side versus the other. Torticollis is most commonly caused by an upper cervical subluxation. How can an infant get a vertebral subluxation? The 2 most common ways an infant can get a subluxation are through restricted positioning in utero and from a difficult or traumatic birth that stretches the muscles of the neck. An upper cervical subluxation creates a disruption in the input to the brain, especially through the vestibular, proprioceptor, and visual senses. Instead of seeing the environment through a balanced frame and even field of vision, the brain takes the world tilted. The brain will develop how it perceives the environment based on this imbalance. If left uncorrected, motor patterns for learning, balance, posture, and fine movement coordination will develop based on the compensation due to the head tilt and rotated neck. The deviation becomes the default. The brain can't develop to its greatest potential. Abnormal or less than ideal motor patterns, balance, and posture can result. The aim of chiropractic is to adjust the vertebral subluxation of the upper cervical spine. A vertebral subluxation creates a sensory input disruption. Correcting this by an adjustment improves the function of proprioceptors found in the muscles and joints of the upper cervical spine. There is now better coordination between the upper cervical spine, inner ears, and eyes. The cerebellum is now receiving a better interpretation of its environment. The brain can now respond to environmental changes better. Motor patterns for learning, balance, posture, and fine movement coordination can develop at a higher potentiality. Better function equates with better health. Thank you for listening. For even more information on how chiropractic can benefit you and your family, please check out my website, ohiospecific.com. That's ohiospecific.com. Until next time, remember to keep your head cool, feet warm, and your mind busy.